Tim as an oboist, he was solid as a rock. He had the most beautiful, clear, true sound. I sort of don't really remember him ever missing a note. He was extraordinary.
I first met Tim when I was on trial for the RPO, and just this really amazing character, this kind of calming influence from the seat, the smile on his face, his enjoyment of work. It didn't matter what we were doing, you know, from a kind of Mahler symphony through to a Broadway concert. He was just so happy to be there, performing with his colleagues, and just kind of playing to an audience. There's this energy about him that is just unique and is greatly missed.
I first met Tim on an RPO gig when I was probably 21, 22, and I lost my place in the music in Danse Macabre by Sanson, and I just remember he just kept playing, and he was kind of classy enough to pretend not to notice that I'd lost my place and didn't have a clue where I was. So yeah, it was a really nice first impression I had.
Tim was a rarity. I don't think, you know, in this world where you can have your kind of cliques, your friend groups and other people. Tim was loved by everyone. He had just the most easygoing manner, and he would listen to people and they would approach him about anything, and he transcended all social norms within the orchestra. And, you know, whatever crisis, whatever problem, he just had time for people, and his love for a kind of good working environment was incredible, and is such an undervalued attribute in what we do.
Whenever we play Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov, which is frequently with Vasily, it makes me think of Tim every time. So it's sort of quite nice in a way that I feel like I can take his memory forward. Every time I go to work, quite often we're playing something that I have played countless times with Tim in the past. And he sort of lives on in the way I play it and the people around me play it.
An abiding memory was my first prom as a member, which was Bluebeard's Castle by Bartók. And I remember just kind of my personal excitement that, you know, being in this orchestra and then just looking across and seeing that he was still probably more excited than me, and he'd been doing it for years. And I just remember thinking, I hope that I can bring that and take it forward, because that is such a treat to kind of have a colleague like that. As with Johnny, Scheherazade is a kind of all-time Tim memory. Rack 2, which we did a lot of and still do a lot of. Again, there's moments there where, you know, I can just see Tim's body language from the seat, his kind of where he'd be getting ready, when he'd be cleaning his instrument. It's kind of just the routine of Rack 2. One that sticks is when we used to do Classical Spectacular in this wonderful space, is his beautiful D'Amore solo in Bolero. I will always remember him doing that and then demanding that he buy us a beer afterwards because he was earning far more money than us that day.
I remember this really amazing execution of a very difficult second oboe bit in a Dvorak symphony. And I remember just as I often was, kind of being a little bit in awe of Tim and like his sort of perfect production and control and his ear. And then I looked over to my left, and next to his music on the stand was his phone, and there was Wimbledon, and he was watching Djokovic at the same time.
Away from the stage, I mean, sport was a binding thing. I mean, since Tim died, Everton have got good and Spurs have got really bad.
Come on, get rid of it. You're all around for the substitution thing.
We had this tradition where we would go to the cricket every year to go and see a T20. I don't know what that is. Tim and Patrick definitely knew what that was. One of my favourite memories of Tim is those cricket games. He would get so into it, so excited. He would start shouting stuff onto the pitch that I didn't understand.
Rugby was less his thing, so we kind of had to disagree on that, but tennis, football, any Olympic sport, you know, we'd be kind of just talking about that. The pair of us, when we were on a kind of oboe cycle ride, would be kind of chasing Johnny up a hill, and we'd just be kind of laughing about the fact we're so useless on wheels, but so happy to be out as a kind of triumvirate.
Tim was sort of famed for nightclub dancing on tour.
On a free day on tour, he would probably start by going to yoga. Somehow he'd be out of the hotel about 8 o'clock, even if we had had a couple of beers after the concert. Then we'd probably get a message saying, lads, do you want to go and do a lunch? And then in the evening, you know, quite likely he'd be at a book club, probably bringing an element of calm and humour to that environment. And just, again, late in the evening, you'd probably find him in the hotel bar, just chatting away to people.
Generally, on the last night of a week or two, the post-concert drinks wouldn't quite cut it.
Go, Tim, go.
And we'd end up in a nightclub, and Tim would be the first on the dance floor, and his moves were actually surprisingly good. I think Tim knew ultimately not to take playing the oboe too seriously. He took it very seriously indeed, but he sort of knew it wasn't life and death. And sometimes in times of stress, when I've found playing very difficult, he's kind of been a bit of a guiding light. You're just sort of thinking, just put it down, take it out your mouth, forget about it for a bit. It's not the end of the world.
I remember when I started in the orchestra, I looked across to the cello section and thought, I recognise that young woman, and it was Naomi, who is Tim's daughter, and we'd been at school together. So then I thought, oh my God, at some point Tim has heard me play the oboe when I was like 17. This is an absolute disaster. My trial is ended before it starts. And it was such a unique thing, kind of having a father and daughter in the orchestra, and you know, Tim like bursting with pride at Naomi having their job. And then, you know, if she'd drop a pencil, you know, just the kind of mock look on his face, he'd, you know, roll his eyes and shrug his shoulders and be like, oh, Naomi. You know, to kind of just, at the end of a concert, you just see him look over at the cellos and just be, yeah, bursting with pride that he shared that moment with his daughter. And it's such a special thing for them to have had on and off the stage.
To have this brand new piece by John Rutter is amazing. So John Rutter was the sort of director of music at Tim's funeral. And at that time, I sort of realised actually that there was a closer connection than I had known. I think Tim always admired John Rutter as a composer, and particularly his writing for oboe, which is always exquisite.
Tim was, a Cambridge-educated young man, and obviously the oboe was a very important part of that. But he's a very well-read person. You know, the link to this Shakespeare, and particularly Romeo in the first movement. I think Tim would have been thrilled about this literary link, you know, connecting, you know, his love of the oboe, his love of literature.
This new piece, it's such a shame that Tim didn't get to see it, didn't get to play it. I think, Tim played for John countless times, as did I. And it jumps off the page, actually. I've just been sent a score, and I'm just really excited to play it. Tim and I played as an oboe section for 11 or 12 years. That's a massive chunk of my life, of my musical life and my personal life. You know, we were daily just sitting together in orchestra. It's a musical partnership that I don't think will be matched in the rest of my life. It will stay with me forever.
As with all of us in the RPO, especially in the woodwind section, I don't think there's a day that goes past where we don't think about Tim or miss him, but the beauty of our job is we play pieces that come up again and bring up these memories, and I think that is what keeps his memory alive and present. And yeah, this concert it's a beautiful chance for us all to kind of celebrate his life now that a bit of time has passed, and to enjoy his time and career with the RPO and celebrate what an amazing person and player he was.